Hello, fans. Welcome again to High and Tight, coming to you from the VBCA convention here in Northern Virginia this year. With me today, we've got Jason Burton, and we got a special guest today. We're going to have a bunch of special guests this weekend. And our first one up is Jack Farrick with Catchers U. Jack, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, John. How you doing?
Thanks for joining us. I'm doing pretty awesome. I'm okay with not being in school this morning, to be honest with you. Burton, you haven't been in school all year, right?
Since October.
All right. Well, we are here. A bunch of the high school coaches and all coaches in the area have descended on it, and so we're going to talk to a bunch of people. But Jack specializes in working with catchers, and we want to talk with him a little bit. So when you're working with catchers, what are some of the things that you really like to focus on?
I think the biggest thing when we're working with catchers is making sure that we keep it athletic versus mechanic. And I think a lot of times when catchers get behind the plate, you start seeing them trying to do so much mechanically that they get tight or they get a little stiff. So we kind of take every catcher as is and we kind of see what they do well, and then we try to pinpoint what we think will help them. So, we train traditionally, on both feet. We do one knee, glove side knee down, arm side knee down. We try to work on not just receiving out of those positions, but also blocking, and then obviously throwing. Our philosophy is the more tools you can put in the belt, the better, and then be able to adjust on the fly, because at the end of the day, it's a game, and we want our catchers to have the skill set to be in a competitive environment and be able to athletically adjust as needed.
Yep.
So I think that obviously the big knock right now with catchers is not everybody, but you have a certain group on Twitter and social media and in baseball who are just so anti-one knee down. I think the same thing can be said for a lot of things across baseball, like your metrics and data, and you have groups that pro data that don't believe in anything else, and anti-one knee down. And I think, like you said, the biggest thing is being able to do a little bit of everything, adapt to the player, adapt to the environment, adapt to the pitcher.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of people that maybe are hesitant to do one knee or are hesitant to want their catchers to be in those spots, I think usually it comes from one of two things. One, they've had a lot of success the other way, right? They've had success they've had great catchers. They've had somebody that could really do the job, and so they're like, no, that's what a good catcher looks like, right? That's what it looks like. And it's hard sometimes to change somebody's mind when they've had success. Rightfully so, right? You can't tell me that you can only be successful if you catch from one knee. What I would say, and I would challenge those same coaches, because the coaches that are successful at some point did something that made them different from their competition. That's why they're successful, right? Versus, the average. And I would say to them is, think of one knee catching as just another tool that you can add to your arsenal when it comes to your team, right? And the other thing is too, it's a lot of times things in baseball when they don't look right or they don't look the same, you're hesitant, but sometimes you have to just try them out, and it may not be for you. And I think that's the thing is certain kids work differently. And there's a lot of times where we know this is like, you guys especially, like, you're like, all right, dude, this kid's a catcher. He can swing it. He's got a good arm. He's probably going to play first base. And it's like, okay, instead of being like, okay, well, why is he going to be? Well, he's a little stiff. He's a little tight. He doesn't get to the low ball. There's certain things that he can't do that he's going to need to do to be able to get to be a successful college, catcher. Well, what if we can give him something, can give that individual player an opportunity to stay behind the plate? Because if we can do that, then it works. The elite guys, the Real Mutos, the Yachties, they can catch from anything. They can probably be upside down and catch. Like they really can. But it's simplifying the position to the point where we can get more competent catchers back there. And I think that's scary for a lot of people because they're just so used to it, and sometimes success kills growth. And but I'm not here to say like it's only one way or the other, because I do respect a lot of people that have had a lot of success that, hey, they do it this way. And I personally believe we make all of our guys and our girls in our academy, they have to catch both traditionally and with one knee. And if you're on one knee, you have to be able to block and throw out of it as well. Because what we don't want is a bunch of bullpen catchers who sit on one knee, not in a good situation, not in an athletic setup, who are just going to catch, and then as soon as we get to 2 strikes and we call a breaking ball or we call an off-speed pitch, we drop it to 2 feet. And I think that's the number one giveaway. I'll say it here on the podcast. The number one thing for catchers who aren't blocking or throwing out of one knee, guys, if there's nobody on base and it gets to 2 strikes and the catcher goes on 2 feet, it's going to be an off-speed pitch. He stays down on one knee with 2 strikes, it's a fastball. It's probably the biggest giveaway all summer. And I know we had some pretty elite guys that had no idea that they were giving it away. But that's kind of, it's just, I think, like I said, I think it's just another tool in the belt, and maybe you use it, maybe you don't.
All right, question. So the one knee catching, I know the first one that I recognized and really noticed it with was Sally Perez with the Royals, because he's a bigger guy. He's 6'5", and I think part of what he was doing was to get himself out from in front of the umpire so he could present a lower strike. Is there a reason to do one knee catching aside from maybe making it more comfortable? Is there something you're looking for in people that you would suggest doing one knee catching versus doing traditional?
Yeah, I think just load management, right? Like your bigger, stronger offensive guys who are big, strong, you got that 6'3" and above catcher, right? It's going to be easier for them to play 7 or 9 innings behind the plate, being in that setup, where you're receiving and you're not straining. And I think a lot of times for some of these catchers, it's all right. How do we get these guys to catch 150 games in the season? How do we have this person, this catcher, be the same offensive threat in the 9th inning as they are in the 1st inning? So I do think, especially at the professional level, I think it's a lot more load management, and that's why you'll see the elite athletes do it, and then you'll see the bigger guys. Mitch Garver was the first one to do it in the big leagues for an entire season, and he won a Silver Slugger. So I think that kind of showed a blueprint of like, hey, you can have an offensive catcher back there who's really going to be successful, and he wasn't the best in receiving that year, but he was good enough that it evened out, or it was plus because of the offense.
Well, I think you'll talk to and hear from some college coaches like, all right, the catcher is so advanced offensively. In order to continue the production of his offense, maybe we put him in left field or first base or right field, and get that guy. Maybe he runs a little bit better. This is going to wear his legs out. Right. That run tool's not going to play as well, so we move him somewhere else. So, like you said, if you can take some of that load management off and some of the stress off of the legs, then it allows the offense to play. It allows their athleticism to play.
And again, you end up making your team a little bit better because a guy that is grinding for you is still grinding. He's still grinding up here. He's still blocking. He's still working hard. But now he's not straining. Not to jump off it, but even at the youth level, we teach kids how to do stuff out of one knee, because sometimes the youth catchers are being asked to catch 4 or 5 games in a weekend. Like, you think about that, like that strain on the body, and the reason why a lot of kids struggle is everything's on the front side of their legs, right? So the knee issues and the quad, everything's on the front. They're on their toes, right? All that stress, all that weight's on the front part of the leg. Whereas if they're in the correct spot, right, they're in the hamstrings, and their heels are in the ground, they're in the backside. And I think, I always have, one thing that people tell me is like, oh, well, they need to get stronger. No doubt. Not during a baseball game, right?
No.
Okay, that helping, that getting stronger is 100%. But let's when we're doing that, let's make sure that we're doing that with a purpose versus, okay, well, we're just gonna get extra reps. I really think that's the hardest part, is because with catching for so long, it doesn't matter. I was a head coach, in high school, and I did just like everybody. I completely forgot about my catchers. You got 2, maybe 3 on a team, and you try to get a whole practice work defensively in 15 minutes. But you're expecting that catcher to be a part of 100% of the plays, because every pitch, they're involved. So, I think that's the thing, is like with one knee, traditional, the advantages of it are, I think at the youth level, you can get more kids behind the plate, and they catch that second game on a pool play, or, to catch the semifinal game. And I think at the older levels, I think you're allowing more offense to stay behind the plate, or you're giving guys the opportunity to catch more games because now they're not so worn out. Now you have college catchers that can catch 3 9-inning games and be a pretty similar player game 1 on game 3.
So, 2 things. Are you saying, for strength-wise, don't bring curl bars, straight bars, and strap bars in the dugout like a Georgia Tech football team before the game? No?
I mean, hey, if you got that dog mentality, you can do whatever you want, man.
And secondly, similar to a pitcher throwing in 3 games in a 5-day set, don't catch a catcher 5 out of 6 games.
Right. Well, and I think that's the hardest part. Like when I think, and you guys know this, like tournament baseball, that's where you normally get, the best competition, and I love it when organizations play double headers because, even if you play a doubleheader Saturday, doubleheader Sunday, you're playing 4 games. And I think the trap is you want your team to play 5 games in a weekend, right? So maybe you split it on Saturday. Guy catches 1 game, and then you win, and then you're like, okay, we'll rest him game 2, right? We'll let him DH where he plays other position, secondary position. Then you get on Sunday, and it's like, we got to win. Because if we win, then we get to play 4 games. And if we win, then we get the championship, then we play 5 games, and then everybody by championship game hits that adrenaline, and right before you know it, kids caught 4 out of 5 games. And it's that because you need to win to play more, I would love more double headers just so you're already going to play, and that, yes, you want your team to win, but if you lose, that's not going to impact the overall development or number of games you're going to play that weekend.
For the record, PBR does not make you play 3 games in a day. So
Yeah, no PBR tournament for that. One question, and this is stemming off of something we were talking about when we were breaking down a player recently on the podcast, is traditionally when we talk about catchers, we talk about their pop times and their arm strength behind the plate. But I know at the major league level, with the stats movement that we've seen, they've been focusing a lot more on pitch framing and receiving. What do you think is more important in a catcher right now, throwing or framing and receiving?
I think it's easier to see if a kid is athletically prepared to play in college by watching the tools and the arm. I think the metrics are easier for more coaches to kind of get a feel like, okay, how hard does he throw from behind the plate? Is that going to play? Pop time, obviously that's, it's, yeah. And then even like, the Pop Time app that a lot of people use, like, I've been on there and you can, trying to get an exact thing, like you're like, oh, and then, I think there was a funny tweet or something. It was like, has anyone ever posted a non-sub 2, on it? And I'm like, that's pretty funny. But I think, impact of the game at the youth level, high school level, collegiate level, framing. I think that's just harder to see.
because you're going to have so many more opportunities.
You're going to have so many more opportunities to impact the game, right? And I call it the 2-2 pitch, right? We work really hard on being outside the ball and everything, but that 2-2 pitch where it's either strike 3 or full count. And I think that right there you can really impact. I do think, though, because of the awareness that's being brought, I think people are starting to pay attention to that more. But, like, at the youth level, another reason why a lot of these guys want to catch the same catcher is because they know they're getting more calls. They know they're getting more strikes. And I think that, even with the robot zones that might be coming up in the big league level, I still think, though, receiving is still going to be huge because at the end of the day, a robot can call it a ball or strike, but there is a tempo and a rhythm that a good catcher or a great catcher brings, and the confidence that he brings to that pitcher, right? Everyone here, that's seen the game, when that pitcher has complete faith in that catcher and everything looks good and everything feels good, and that guy's just shaping that pitch so that guy feels like he's got his stuff, even if he doesn't, right? I feel like that skill set is always going to play no matter what. Even if it's called a ball, that there's a difference between catching a ball that's close and the guy going, all right, I'm close, versus a guy looking like a rodeo clown back there, just fighting it off, And I think that a lot of people are like, oh, no, the skill won't matter. I think it always will matter. what I like is that there's a focus being brought to it now, where you're starting to say, okay, hey, like this catcher, he's impacting the game defensively, and now people are watching, how a guy receives, how a guy blocks, because you've seen a lot of college teams, right? And I was a big guy too, but like it always feels like a lot of kids go there who are studs, have the arm, can swing it, blah blah blah, and then you go watch the game on Saturday, and it's the guy that's a little bit bigger, doesn't hit as well. It's like, well, why is that guy in the game? Because tools-wise, he's not the guy. On this college roster, he's tools-wise number 3, but he's the number 1. Why? Because he receives. He's got the trust, and the intangibles come out. So I do think receiving and blocking, and I think the other thing too is the body language and understanding, because that's what I think a lot of colleges are starting to look at is can this catcher be a leader, and how you put time and effort into receiving, because receiving is not for you as a catcher, it's for the pitcher, right? And it's a servant leadership type thing. And if somebody's really bought into, and this, like one of my favorite guys I work with is J.P. Williams, who's committed to George Mason. Now granted, I don't think J.P. had a choice. Right? He has his older brother John, went to Mason and pitched professionally, and then also Joe, who pitched at JMU. And so he grew up with 2, high-end pitchers in the house.
He had to catch.
He had to catch. Right, he had to catch. But the way he personally breaks it down and cares about every little thing, like takes notes and really cares, like that's why I think George Mason got an absolute dude, because that's another coach on the field. And I think it's hard, again, like we were saying, it's hard to see that and to put that on a sheet of paper. Right. But that's what I would tell college coaches is, like, if you're watching a guy receive and you see a guy really get into it and you see a guy come off the field talking to the coach or talking to the pitcher, like that's a guy who's really invested. And the more invested you are as a catcher in your staff, usually the more success you're going to have.
And back to that servant leadership and that relationship with the catcher, I know this is a thing that we've only had since late May. As an Orioles fan, my favorite thing in the world is a good Adley hug at the end of a game. So,
right.
Jason, you have anything else for Jack?
Make sure that you follow Catchers U on Twitter, on Instagram, and on TikTok. I know Instagram and TikTok, he's got some fire content out there.
No dancing, though. I don't dance. We just catch. No dancing.
Okay. Well, Jack, thank you very much for your time. This was awesome. It's a pleasure having you.
Appreciate you, brother.
Coach, appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right.